Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm not sure if you heard the opening music to the intro, but can you girls give me a hands up if you heard that? Yes, okay. So I guess it was just on my end. Good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m. in Toronto, Canada, and I welcome you to Around the World with Duff. That's me, Around the World. That's right there, a little Around the World. We've got an amazing show for you today. It is Thursday, July 2nd, the day after Canada Day. And that, that has a whole separate meaning for me this year and for everyone else. I'm sure we reassessed what Canada Day was all about for all of us, and actually July 4th is also coming up in the U.S. So I'm sure the climate is quite has changed. That's for sure. So I think as we gain a new perspective on life and on relations between each other, these days that we have dedicated to the beginnings of our country, we need to all look back at the history and educate each other. That actually was the whole purpose of this stream, was to educate people in different countries. So for those of you just joining, Around the World with Duff is me visiting people, connecting with people in different countries around the world, gaining different viewpoints. And it did start with the beginning of COVID. I wanted to find out what was happening in people's worlds on the ground, with no media slant, no criticism of what was happening, just talking to the people of the country. And so now that has morphed into, of course, the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis changed the climate quite drastically. And so I had to reassess. I took a hiatus, so we're back, and I think it's taken on a whole new light, because I think that COVID and Black Lives Matter are related, and we're going to talk to the guests about that as well. But I think that that allowed everybody to get out and protest, which I think was an incredible thing. I call it a beautiful tragedy. So this show is obviously about that, gaining people's perspectives. And today my guests are Aurianna Tuttle, who's in Los Angeles, and Garrison, who's an American, born in America, but living in Canada. So two good friends of mine who have their own experience with everything that's going on. So now I also like to do a little COVID update, because this did start with COVID. I also like to let people know what's happening, so I'll do a little bit about that. This show happens on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I'm going to try and keep it at 1 p.m., but the times change depending on people's schedules. So you can find it on YouTube. Let me just get my little thingamajiggy here, at Duff McDonald. Easy to find, and it's also streaming live on two different Facebook pages. So Around the World with Duff Facebook page, and just my personal page, because there's a lot of people there that I'm sure have the ability to tune in. So happy post Pride to everybody. Hope everyone had a wonderful and safe Pride. We watched the fireworks. Well, there weren't any fireworks in Toronto last night. I'm sure nowhere else. Well, you never know. I think there were a lot of personal fireworks happening, and the CN Tower was lit up. It was underwhelming. I'll just say that much. It was, we love to go out and tune into the fireworks. So that was definitely missed this year, but we don't want to gather in groups of people. So we're trying to social distance people. And then, it's also post Canada Day. My upcoming guests on Saturday is my friend Sandra, who is in Guadalajara, Mexico, an incredible artist, and Dr. Tim Guimond. We're going to talk about mental health, which is really important. So let's get to the COVID update. Okay, so things are spiking, my friends, and it's getting crazy. The states, Dr. Fauci was talking about today, the cases are going to be up to 100,000 a day if we're not careful. So I know that our border is locked to the U.S. and the UK is locked incoming. So I just feel really bad for our friends in the States. I just don't think people realize that this virus doesn't care. It is microscopic and will attack, and the earth is angry. And there are so many reasons why it's, out of control. But they were talking about oxygen being very important for recovery. So you've seen a lot of cases recovered, actually. So in Canada, we have let's see here, in Ontario, actually, we have 35,000 plus cases, but 30,000 plus have recovered. So that actually is a really great. That is not happening in the U.S., unfortunately, but that's due to early lockdown and the way things are handled within the hospitals and medical system. And we have 2,672 deaths, which is horrible. But there's the death numbers are climbing worldwide. We've got 10 million plus. That number has doubled, I think, within a week and a bit. But almost half. 50% of the people have recovered. 5,442,000 worldwide. So, I mean, while that's great, there have still been 514,697 lost souls. So, yes, as you can see, also the little graphs beside, worldwide, the cases are going up. In Canada, the cases are going down, which is a good sign. In Quebec, they're going down. Ontario, Alberta is kind of flatlining a little bit. British Columbia, don't get too confident, because it hasn't gone down. Nova Scotia's gone down. Saskatchewan's peaked, Manitoba's peaked, and Newfoundland and Labrador. So, things are definitely on the move, and so we need to social distance, wear our masks, and be vigilant. Yes. So. Without further ado, I think I'm going to bring in my guest, Aurianna. I've got a little comment here. Elena. Hello. Oh, Elena. Aurianna knows Elena. Wow, that's like out of the blue. Welcome. Thanks for joining, Elena. So I think Aurianna is standing by. Let me just see if she's there. Yes. Okay. Aurianna. Hey.
Hi, good morning.
Can you hear me?
Good morning, Duff. How are you? I can. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Good. How are you?
Good morning.
What's that?
Good, I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this platform to be able to share my story.
You're welcome. Well, it's pretty early there, right? It's like 7 a.m.
It's very early.
Thank you. You look amazing for 7 a.m.
But thank you. I tried to clean up for you and the crowd and the audience.
You always look amazing, and you are an amazing person. I actually wanted to say to you that you inspired me to reassess and to change my sort of viewpoint on things. I don't know if you know this, but I actually tuned into you. I just was like looking at people's feeds, and I came across you in a video. And I think it was just at the beginning of Black Lives Matter, and you were sitting in your living room, and you were contemplating, right? And you were contemplating whether or not you should go out into the streets.
Yes.
And you heard people protesting out in the streets, and I got chills from that. And then I've now have seen, and you could talk about your journey, but I now have seen your progression and the journey through all of that. Can you just tell people a little bit about yourself, Ari? I know people out there.
Of course,
I'd love to hear.
Of course, my name is Ari Angelique. And I'm a social activist. I call myself a freedom fighter and a Black Lives Matter advocate. I was born and raised in Southern California. I grew up as a biracial woman. So my mother is Caucasian, my father is African American. And I will say this. I always share this story, as that I was raised as a Black woman. My mother took a look at me, and she knew from the moment that I was born that the struggle, by the color of my skin, the texture of my hair, how this world would see me. And I thank her every day for that, because that is I think the reason who I am today is because I was raised to be this strong Black woman.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I grew up in California. As you know, how we met, I was a musical theater actress for most of my life. But I've always had a passion for, diversity and social injustice and all of that. I've just never been able to tap into it. And then I ended my career last year to focus on bringing diversity into children's film and television. So all of 2019, I was, networking my way into major studio networks, creating shows with diverse characters. And while I got a lot of traction, I found that I kept hitting, this sort of door, which was, yes, we want your content, but we don't have enough ethnicity behind the scenes.
Right.
We love your idea, but we're not quite ready. No other studio. There is a couple of shows that are quite diverse, and some movies. We have Princess and the Frog. We've got some of those movies.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, there's not enough.
No.
And it is important that children see themselves represented on television, including myself growing up. I can't think back to any characters that I ever related to.
No.
So that was sort of my first sort of in as far as, injustice and diversity. And so I was doing that long before this, this movement happened. And then when this movement happened, right before, I was speaking to a couple of friends about a month before this, George Floyd's death. And I said, and this is really strange to me. It's a connection. I said, I have this feeling that there's a bigger calling for me, and I just don't know what it is. I know that, as an artist, creating these stories and being and singing is what I do, but there's something else. And then this happened. And it's how I sort of got into social activism. And I always tell this story to people when they ask me my journey through it. The first moment I went to just a couple of protests, like you saw that story, I was contemplating whether, I truly believe we all have a role in this, whether it's on the front lines, whether it's behind the scenes. And knowing myself as an athlete, as a Spartan OCR obstacle course racer, I'm a very big presence. I'm strong, and I'm not afraid of a lot of people or things, and are having conversations. And so I decided to finally go. After you saw that video, I went to a protest with a friend and just sort of sat back and was just there to support and follow. And this thing happened to me. This young ally, this young boy came up to me and said, "Hey, I hear you leading these chants, and I have this megaphone, and I think that you need it more than I do." And I said, "Okay, thanks, brother." And he said, "Listen, if you don't find me after, this is yours. You keep it. You need it, sis." And he looked at me and he said, "Speak on it, sis." And the moment he said that, there was probably 300 people behind me sort of waiting for someone to lead. And I started leading these chants. And by the end of that protest, I had led over 2,000 people through an entire 4 hours. And I think I think that was the universe. It sort of gave me that megaphone. That was something higher power.
Yeah.
Because ever since then, I've been leading thousands of people all over California, and just sort of being that person, being that voice for people here in LA.
And that's I've been discussing this with other people, and it's kind of like this beautiful tragedy, right? I call it divine order, where one thing, whether it's good or bad, leads into another, but it supports the other thing, and you move in, right? The megaphone led you into somewhere where you were completely right, that was your calling, right? In the place you're supposed to be. And that's amazing. So, and I didn't realize that you were doing that, the work before in television. That's incredible. So yes, this is like your place for sure. Like
exactly. And it all ties in, and I made it into a lot of major studio networks, Nickelodeon and a lot, Netflix. I was able to network my way right in because they want to bring more content like that, but the world wasn't quite ready. I think now that this is happening, I've been getting calls and things. So I'm hoping that some of my stories do make it, because it's so important that all ethnicities, but especially, the Black children see themselves represented. It's so important.
And that's my point, is the education of the younger generation, right?
Exactly.
And that's and then that was something also that you said to me. You said, we need white people to speak up. We need you to be an ally. And that was the key for me. And I went, fuck this. I'm getting on, and I'm getting back on, and I'm changing the whole thing, because it all,
that's awesome.
That's what it has to be. And I owe that to you, actually. So thank you so much, because it's affected so many different parts of my life as well. And, and that's what we have to do. All of us have to speak up. We all have to get out there.
And talking about allyship, I think I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that's the difference between the past, protesting in our history and the fight that we fought, is that this time, what I've seen being on the front lines is there are more allies than there are us out there, and they are more angry than we are. And I think that's the difference between history and now. And I think that's what will actually change this country.
Yes, I noticed
that we have some people standing with us, and it's important that I always say this too. When I'm out there, I'm always given a platform to sort of speak and at different protests, and I usually do share my narrative, but I also try and have these conversations and educate the younger generation as much as I can within those couple of minutes that I have. I think it's important that, because I'm seeing a lot of the younger generation is out there and they're angry and they have their signs and they're yelling, and it's great because we're seeing change with that. But it's also important to educate our youth, our younger generation, on what the next steps to take. Make sure that every single person there pulls out their phone and is registered to vote right there. Everybody has access to a phone. So I think, educating on voting and just any steps that we can continue to take to keep this movement going is so important than just standing outside and yelling,
because you need change.
I know
change, right?
Yeah. We need, exactly. And I know you've seen some of my videos from different protests. I was going to just touch on a few that I've been to in my experiences. Because I'm from, I lived in New York for many years, and I'm living now in Koreatown in Los Angeles. Oh. And it's kind of quiet here. It's a little bit quiet. Everyone's sort of hiding. It's different here with the demographic here. So there's not a lot of protesting here. So I found that I've been going to different cities around Los Angeles. And I've been picking the ones that I feel need me the most. And I'm so glad I did, because I chose this city in California. It's called Tahunga. It's out in the valley. And I showed up on Juneteenth. And instead of celebrating, I decided that I wanted to fight, and I wanted to, really use my voice. I thought Juneteenth is a monumental day in our history that is, it's not celebrated. No one really knows about it. And so I think, so I went to Tahunga, and I showed up, and there was no organizer. And I realized that there was a counter protest across the street, and it was full of KKK. It was full of neo-Nazis. It was full of Trump supporters. And on our side, there was probably 20 to 30 people, but no one was leading. So I took the opportunity and just took my, that's a picture from it. I took my microphone, and I just led them. I led them the entire time, and I had no fear, and what was great was that I had four allies, four white guys that came up to me and said, "Hey, Ari, we see that you're leading. We want you to know that we have eyes on you at all times. Don't worry about those people. If anything happens, we've got your back." And so because amazing. Of that, I was able to do what I needed to do, so we stood there, and there was a lot of yelling back and forth. And at one point, they're very aggressive. So they charged us, and I just stood up, and it was, it was scary, because there was, as you see in that picture, there was a lot of, KKK men there. And so I put myself, my body, and my microphone in between my people, and stood in front of that guy's face. And I said, we are here to have conversations. We are here to listen. We are not here to fight. I don't condone violence, but I said, if you guys make a move, that is self-defense. We have got to protect ourselves. So I would advise you guys to turn around and go back to your side, and they did. But that picture you'll see, they did. That picture you'll see, though, I had to drive around. I wanted to have a conversation, and we were so far away. And that guy in particular, plus about 7 more, came rushing my car. And I've never experienced so much hate death in my life. I've never seen so much hatred at me personally, just for standing there and standing for a cause, fighting for Black lives, fighting for equality. It was just so
you feel the generational, right? The weight of it, right? You've got that all those generations on your shoulders. It's like,
it was but I, and you'll see in that photo, which a couple of my friends said, you can see so much anger and hate in him. But I'm sitting there, and I'm just telling him, I think at that moment I was like, dude, I just want to talk. I'm not here to say I hate you, And so
I'm here to change your mind.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I'm not afraid. And that's one thing. A lot of people are nervous for my safety. And yes, it's a price with being a social activist. But I think for me, it's more important that the message I'm trying to get across, and who I am as an individual. I'm not there to fight, and I pray to God that I stay safe and my people stay safe, and we're there. But if we don't have these conversations, if we don't talk to the other side, if we don't talk to the police, then, what change is going to happen? We have to somehow coexist.
Yeah.
So continuing to scream back and forth and, racial slurs, what is that going to do?
No.
So for me, I want to talk to them. I want to know what these Trump supporters, I'm sure you saw the other video in Huntington Beach too.
Yeah. Wow.
The woman that we all call Karen.
Yeah. 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 She
So,
was
but yeah,
quite a piece of work. But I love that the cop took her aside and said, "Can I talk to you for a second, lady?" Over here.
Exactly. He took her away, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So
what came on our side?
Yeah. Yeah. What's been your experience with the police in all of these different protests? Have you felt their support, or have you felt friction from them?
It's funny because for me, for some reason, I was talking to my group the other day, the police gravitate towards me. For some reason, I always become, I guess because I'm leading, but I always become sort of the person of contact for them.
Right.
And so in Tujunga, surprisingly, I was quite worried about, what kind of police they had there, but we had a lot of support in Tujunga, which was
amazing.
Incredible. He kept coming over to me and saying, "What do you need? How can we help you?" When I left, the four officers escorted me to my car to make sure I got, in safely. And so they've been great. Huntington Beach was a little bit different. I experienced, for me, I'm sort of intuitive, so I can feel what people's motives are just, by having a conversation. And I think they were just there to make sure, there was no violence, but I did feel that they were more, standing with the other side in Huntington Beach. Personally, it was, but so far I haven't experienced any riots or anything like any, and I pray that it stays like that, because when I go, I try to keep it peaceful. I try to shy away from the violence and the fighting and the, having the cops having to, take more force on us. If I see that happening, I will make sure that we defer the situation and do what we have to do. So
yeah, how did you feel about the riots? Because I heard some things from some Black friends of mine, like, what, there's a built up anger and aggression for 400 years of anger. It happened in New York too, in the riots in, I think, in 1927 or something like that. It was exactly the same thing, and it's happened numerous times. The riots come along with the protests.
Yeah.
What do you think that?
Yeah.
Do you think that's
I think,
mostly white people taking advantage or the situation?
I mean, if you look at let's also think about, like you were mentioning, the pandemic and COVID-19. Let's think about how people are, especially in America. We're exhausted. We are out of work. And think about the inner city areas that are not getting the funding that they need. They're starving. You know what I mean? I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I won't say, that's not something that I obviously would condone, but I understand the state of our country, especially in America here, where, with everything going on with the pandemic and how, our president handled things and how the healthcare system is just garbage, and then on top of, and then we have George Floyd's death, which just set off a bomb. So unfortunately, it's like, I don't condone it, but we're angry, and the people that were rioting. Yes, I think if you see, there are a lot of white people that I think were instigating, and I think there's those sort of Antifa groups and things like that. But I think that we're angry, and I think that for 400 years we have been oppressed, and people want to. I've experienced a lot of white Americans saying, "Well, look how you live. Look at how Black people live." That's what we were given. That is what we were handed. So we are trying to do the best that we can do. And that is, you know what I mean? So I just, I think that we're done. And I think that that was the defining moment. I think the George Floyd's death on top of the pandemic and everything, like you said, it's all sort of one cohesive thing. Yeah. So I think this country is just in a scary place. Yeah. And we're in a state. I'm glad that the riots, they're done, but I'm not going to say that I'm completely against them. I understand. I'm not in their position. And, I think some of the people that were rioting were in the worst of conditions, with their families and their home, and we're angry, and it's the police. And it's just, it's a lot. But I definitely am glad that it's done.
Yeah. And it's also corporate America, don't you think? I think it's also like anger at Walmart and these huge corporations who like lord over the country. They really do. Like, they have a lot more power than we think they do. And so, there's also that. So, like, what do you think? I mean, because, like you said, things disappeared. Like after Rodney King, they, the protests happened and other protests for like maybe a month or two, and then it was done. But like you said, this is different. So what do you think we need to do to keep it going, to continue?
Yeah, well, that's my fear.
Right.
That's my fear, is that the trend, that especially social media is such a great outlet. Right now, I think I'm so, we're lucky that we have this sort of outlet and this vehicle to continue the movement. But I'm noticing on my feed, I'm noticing that it's sort of dying down. The moment that and I encourage people to continue. I think we cannot, and I don't plan on stopping. I'm going to mention my group later, but I have an organization called Rock Era. And I just think it's important that we continue. And like I always say, having conversations is important. I think educating the people around you is important. And I think, we're going to continue out here, I know, to protest, and things are changing, which is great, slowly but surely. This country has been built like, how it's running for 400 years, so it's going to take way more than overnight to change the way that the system works. But essentially we have to go in and change the system. That's what we're trying to do, is really reshape and reform this country, and that's the hard part. But I just encourage people to continue to, we're still we're still fighting for justice. For example, Breonna Taylor's case, nobody's been arrested. We have one cop that was arrested, but we need these officers charged.
Yes.
There's just so many cases that are, so I think I'll touch on a quick topic too, is defunding the police out here. I think it's I think some people are confused on what that is, and I tried to talk about it and post about it. But the police is, police brutality and racial profiling is just so, the main issue here, and why Black America, why we're getting killed. And so I think it's important to understand that we are not at all means by saying we want to take away police completely and abolish police. That's impossible. No. We just want to take away so much. They have so much of the funding needs to be reallocated to other communities. For example, Black communities that are in danger, that are, also healthcare. There's just so many things that we can reallocate the funding to. So I think it's important that you educate yourself on, what are the ways that we can continue.
Educating the police too, right? That, like, they need to rejig their programs on relations. Exactly. And like you're talking about having psychiatrists or people who are into mental health answering the 911 calls. Right. And that is that's a huge thing, because that's, that would save so much time. Or do you retrain police with that sort of like added on to their police training, like, psychology and harm reduction and all that. Like, there's so much mental health. I know here, like, we've had quite a few crazy shootings. Like one guy on the subway who didn't have a gun, but he was screaming and yelling, and the cops had a gun, and of course they shot him. And he was mentally ill, and they didn't know what to do. Right. So
same thing with Elijah McClain. I'm sure you've heard of that story that's been circulating. The young Black violinist. It's the same thing. I mean, this young boy was just walking down the street and dancing, I think, and he had a ski mask on, and then it took 7 police to get him down, and they injected something in him, and he had a heart attack. I mean, it's just like, it's insane. It's just so it's just this just has to stop, and we have to start with the system. We have to start with the higher power. And that's another thing, is make sure to, I know you're in Canada, but whoever's listening, it's important that we understand voter suppression is real. Yeah. And we're seeing it happen already, and so my fear is, come election day, I think it's roughly 150 days out here. And it's just, I don't know what's going to happen to this country if this man is reelected. I don't know the fate of this country. Yeah. And so, it's just, we just have to continue to fight, and I will continue to fight until we see. This is just something that I think I'll be fighting for the rest of my life. Yeah, to be honest, and I think I think that's just the reality of it.
Hey, Ari, like, sometimes all it takes is one person, a Rosa Parks, or Malcolm, or these people. It was one person that changed a lot, right? So that is a really important thing to remember. Like that, even though we're trying for big numbers, sometimes the universe will just kind of put things together into order, and then you're like you know, you're leading thousands of
Yeah.
people like you have.
Yeah.
Well, we're really
Exactly.
proud of you.
Thank you.
It's incredible. So so what would you say? I know that Allie is in an interracial marriage or arrangement, and she has a young black boy. And I would be interested if you don't have children, do you? Do you have children, Ari?
I don't. Sorry, you broke up. I don't have children, not yet, but I do work with children every day. It's you know, kids are my passion. So
yeah, exactly.
But I don't have my own yet.
So what are your discussions? I know that you know, like you said, it's automatic when a child's growing up. I heard a story of a white child and a black child who were friends, and the mother was arguing with the other woman about when the kid gets to be 16 and gets a vehicle, what that reality is for a black child is different than for a white child. And the discussion you have with your kid about, hey, when you get in your car now, it's different. When you get stopped by a police officer, this is going to be a different situation than this other child, right? What would be your conversation, or what is your conversation with the young kids who you are constantly around?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. I actually work for two white kids in Beverly Hills. I work for a family that I take care of. I do a camp with them, and you know they have kept them very sheltered from a lot of the world. So they don't know anything about the coronavirus. They just think that there's a germ out there. You know, they don't know anything about Black Lives Matter. And you know, they reached out to me and said, you know, as their babysitter, you know, we want to educate them. What do we do? You know, and I noticed they purchased a book called Raising White Kids. And I kind of skimmed through it. I realized, and this is a great sort of crash course, you know, but I think it's so we're going to have a conversation. We're going to sit down, the five of us, and I'm going to talk to them, you know, to the kids with the parents. Because I think it's important as far as you know, allies and white children. It is important to teach them very, very young their privilege and their advantage. And I think it's also important to make them understand that children with different skin colors and different ethnicities have a very different experience growing up. And it is, you have to, it's much more difficult, and that's just the reality of it, you know. And there's a way to explain it to them, you know, and I in a way to not make, you know, because I know kids will, you know, my life, I actually, one of the kids saw a sign on my window and it said Black Lives Matter. And the first thing the little boy said, the boy that I take care of, I guess that means my life doesn't matter, you know? So instantly it's sort of that like,
oh, interesting.
It's important to explain, you know, yeah. And that's the first thing he said. So, and I explained to him, you know, I said, well, you know, it's not that we're not saying that your life doesn't matter, Ethan. We're just letting you know that right now, I didn't want to get into it because he doesn't really know what's going on. But I just said right now, it's important that we focus on the Black lives. And he was like, well, I don't know. So, you know, we're going to have a conversation, but I think, and then when it comes to, you know, I actually, this is great you mentioned this too. I have a campaign video that's coming out in probably a couple days, and it's starring 15 African-American children, and it's for the future generation. And the first, what his father taught him to do, and he's 9 years old. If he is, it's a lot to see these children at this young of an age, you know, have to go through that and have to understand. But I think the younger that we have these conversations, the more it's crucial. Do you know what I mean? So
it's ingrained in them.
But yeah, it's I think it's important that our kids know, because I'm out here fighting for them. That's another thing I forgot to say, is that I'm, you know, that's one of the reasons why I am here, is to fight for our future so that they don't have to, you know?
Yeah, that's a really important
I think it's important to have conversations with any kid, you know?
Yeah, that's a really, really important message.
So,
well, amazing. All right. Thank you so much.
So,
I thank you for the work you've done and are doing, and I hope that you'll keep doing it and make you are making a difference, which I think is incredible. I mean, I always thought you were a powerful person to begin with. You're incredible, powerful singer. I was with Gino last night, and he's like, "Oh my God, that girl!"
God, I love him.
Like, whoa, incredible voice. So use that voice. That voice is right that brought you to the front line.
I'm using it. Girl. I want to say before we go, I forgot to mention Rock Era. Rock Era is right now, it's serving as an activist hub. I don't know if you'll be able to tag it, but I'm on Instagram, and we are serving as a group of people that sort of support So like I said, I was going around to different protests. So now we have a group of people that will go to different protests and help and support, and just be there. And so I encourage you guys to look out for that, because we have huge plans for it. It's going to be something that I hope to see, worldwide eventually. So
Amazing.
Stay tuned for that, for sure.
Well, I'll put that. I'm going to put it on right now.
Thank you.
That's Rock Era is actually on Instagram, Ari?
It is, yeah. I can. The handle is r.o.c_ERA.
Amazing. I love you.
Yes, I love you too. Thank you so much, Def, for giving me a platform to share my story.
You're
welcome.
Really
appreciate it.
Anytime you want to come back on, let me know. I'd love to get updates from you on what's happening, and stay safe out there and keep fighting the fight.
Thank you. Thank you for standing with us. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Anytime. I love you. So I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Incredible woman. Thank you so much, Ari, for coming on the show. As you can see, she's incredibly passionate and incredibly smart and astute and rational. And that's, I think, what is needed in the climate, right? Is just rational, look each other in the eye. We are two humans on this planet cohabitating, and we need to make it work. We have to. So Allie's been standing by patiently. Thank you so much, Allie. I'm going to bring Allie in now. Allie Garrison, who is an incredible artist, singer, as well as activist, and has a huge history in her own family, going back generations. So Allie, are you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Allie. Hi, honey. How are you? Thank you for waiting.
And I just have to say also blessings on Aurianna, because man, just listening to her backstage here, wow, just so much important work that she's doing, and from such a great place. She's following her calling.
Yeah.
And that story about the megaphone is powerful.
Yeah.
Where she, and I love that she's just taking it everywhere and spreading that her message and the message that needs to be aired right now. So
yeah,
you, Aurianna. Yeah.
I know. She like I said, sometimes it takes one person to lead thousands, right? I mean, that's why we have one prime minister or one president trying to lead people, but we rely on leadership. That, I think, might be what's missing in the whole COVID thing, is we don't have people. People are stupid. I'm sorry, but people are dumb. They need to be led. That's why churches exist,
Well, and also I think it's important that that the people that are leading right now are the people that are most impacted by these systems that we're trying to dismantle, because they're experts.
Yeah.
They know the most. They've studied, they've had to study how these things operate in order to survive.
Yeah.
And so they have insights and truth that, we as white people cannot grasp.
No, it's guttural.
Well, we can grasp it, but we have to commit to grasping it. And many white people are not there yet.
Right. And we have to try and understand it too, right?
That's right. And so, that's part of the work that I have committed to doing. Like Aurianna, I'm an artist and a musician, singer, singing teacher, and have I've always been inclined to social activism, and concerned and interested, for many reasons. But I would say in the last 10 years, since social media, and even longer, since social media started coming into our lives, I started to follow activists, and be listening to those voices that were lacking before that.
Right.
We weren't hearing enough of those voices, like Aurianna's, in our education, in our media, in our white mass power culture. We weren't hearing those messages, and so to now be able to hear those voices and listen carefully to what they're asking and what their perspective on history and on current events. To commit to doing that as a white person is to go through a doorway.
Oh yeah.
Because all of a sudden that veil lifts and you can see that white supremacy everywhere.
Yep.
And how our whole systems are built upon it. And once you start seeing that, then how can you possibly sleep at night unless you do something about it?
You can't. If you have any human like heart, you have to act. You have to be an ally. And I'm glad you mentioned listen, because another Black person told me that, a friend of mine. I said, "What do you need me to do?" And she said, "Listen. I need you to listen." And so that actually is super important. I mean, you have been doing this. You've been really an ally for years now, with just in terms of your family history, right?
Well, it's interesting to build on ancestral. I wouldn't say all my ancestors are this way, but there's a particular generation in my ancestry that you know about, because part of the creative projects that have come out of that narrative, who I always knew about this family in my history, but about 6 or 7 years ago, I started really, I was on a social justice theater project you were also involved in.
Oh yeah, Maurice Carter's Innocence, right?
Yeah, the Justice for Maurice Henry Carter.
Right.
And we did it here in Toronto as a fringe play. The playwrights we both are friends with the playwrights, Alicia Payne and Dawn.
Yeah, right.
So doing that project and actually being asked to do it on the U.S. side of the border, so it became a transnational theater project, introduced me to people doing social justice theater in the States.
Right.
And so I met a wonderful mentor, Dr. Vaughn Washington, who is a retired African American theater professor at Western Michigan. And he approached me and said, he found out that my ancestors were the Nathan and Pamela Thomas, Dr. Nathan and Pamela Thomas.
Weren't you at an Underground Railroad museum or something like that?
Well, yes, and so their house at the let me just get there here for you to
Sorry.
Background. So that's my three greats grandparents.
Right.
They were. He was the first white doctor in Western Michigan.
Right.
And in the 1830s, and she was the first school teacher in the school. And they married. He was a birthright Quaker and had been anti-slavery his whole life. And so he basically, through the social media of the time, which was lecturing and talking to people.
Soapbox.
He was treating. He knew all the people because he was their doctor.
Right.
And so he converted so many people to become anti-slavery. A lot of people in that area a lot of white people were pro-slavery, and then listening to him, his appeals, they became anti-slavery.
Right.
And voted as such. So interesting how he worked. And then he married Pamela, and together they were asked to run a station on the Underground Railroad for 20 years. They ran that from 1840 to 1860, just before the Civil War.
So you met him, you met Dr. Washington?
So Dr. Washington had known about them because he lives in that area.
Right.
And he writes about the freedom fighters of the Underground Railroad, and he writes many educational plays directed towards African American experience.
Right.
And so in the education system and beyond. And so he said, I want to work with you and write a play. So we ended up, I did a lot of research on that wing of the family, and found a whole bunch of information at the Bentley Research Library in Ann Arbor, where I had gone to school. Ironically, I didn't know 4 boxes of my family history were just down the road.
Really?
When I was at school many years ago. And I only found that later, like, 6 years ago.
Right.
So that's a whole treasure trove, and I've become very immersed in their letters and their correspondences, and digitizing them with the library, and working to bring all of that information that they wrote about
Yeah.
to light, so the general public can start to understand what was going on historically,
Right.
and what were people thinking about, and it's the exact same thing we're thinking about now.
I know.
And so he and his wife, he was the doctor, so they estimate 1,600 people came, refugees from slavery in the South, came through their house. So she, with 4 kids and a doctor's wife, was 100 people at least a year coming through their place. She was feeding them. She was helping them get some rest, and I guess emotionally they must have been in crisis.
Mhm.
And the doctor was also treating their injuries and illnesses and stuff, and then they would help them get to the next station on the underground.
Which was like north, like probably into Canada.
Well, before Canada became not anti-slavery, but before the British Commonwealth banned slavery,
Mhm.
it wasn't safe to go to Canada either.
Right.
So they would try and settle at least out of reach of the
Yeah.
plantation owners, right?
Montana and North Dakota, like.
Well, or just, parts of Michigan,
Mhm.
parts of the northern states that were a little bit more free than closer to the south. So, and where they had a little bit more sympathy, to be able to settle and find work, and till the land, maybe, try and buy land or rent it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny your name is Ali.
yeah.
A-L-I. You're missing an L in there.
Yeah. So just having being able to recognize that they're in my DNA,
Yeah.
it informs a lot of what I do, Duff. Like, and I know we've had this discussion because you're finding out the same thing about your family, and how much, you know, having the privilege of being able to look deeply into your family.
Yeah.
It is a privilege because not everybody has access to
No.
family records or
No.
family stories,
No.
and so I'm so grateful that I have access,
Yeah.
and that it gives this, I don't know, you probably feel the same way. It's like this deep root, and for people, my friends and community that have been able to do that, it just gives such a grounding to what we do, because good or bad, our ancestry that's what we're standing on the shoulders of.
Yeah.
If it's a painful history or a traumatic history, then we're trying to, heal those wounds.
Yeah.
But we're still standing on their shoulders because they did the best they could
Yeah.
with what they had. And
Yeah.
then if you can find those gold nuggets of those treasures in our roots of people who are inspiring.
Yeah.
And I just, to know that they're in us is such a powerful sensation and reality. So we can build on that.
Totally. And that actually, when I, after seeing Aurianna's video and her saying we need white people to speak up and be an ally, I had to look at how I was going to move forward, how I was going to talk about this. And for me, it's education. It's about, because that's what my experience was growing up. I have an understanding of Black culture and slavery and the history because of how I grew up and the things that happened, like meeting you, like doing Maurice Carter's, like being in a gospel choir when I was, 20, just because I love the music. And I learned through that. So if we can guide, people in that way and care about their culture, like go to these countries, like that's one thing that's also builds compassion and empathy, is going to the heart of that's why this show is so great, is I can go to the heart of the country, right? We can go to South Africa and talk to people in South Africa and all over the world and gain their perspective. But that's being amongst the people of the country is really what gets into your skin, right? Like gets into your cell on a cellular level, and you really start to care about people, right? On a global level.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that white supremacy has created apartheid and segregation.
Yeah.
They don't want that.
Right.
Those systems and the people that led them do not want there to be the conversations that Aurianna is trying to have.
Yeah.
They don't want that. They want there to be these bubbles of privilege where we remain aloof and separate from the painful realities that our systems are inflicting upon people. So and making people so vulnerable. It's not that there aren't these incredible cultures and ethnicities who ethnic groups that are have incredible history and sophistication and rightfully, have their areas where they can be leading, and we can be humbled and learning.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the work that I've and I guess I should speak. Maybe, I don't know, you probably have some questions, but I guess I should want to speak to some of the people that have educated me.
Yeah.
And I would say, that I grew up with fairly intercultural influences, especially from my teens on. Before that, I was in pretty much of a white bubble, but my parents were pretty alternative and taught us critical thinking.
Great.
It was an academic household, and a lot of reading and a lot of music and a lot of conversation happening. So I'm grateful to my parents for giving me that. And then I had to learn about my whiteness. And it took a long time, and it's still there, and I'm still learning about it. It's a life, like Aurianna said it, it's like a lifelong commitment. It's not something that I went into lightly, and I still know that, I have racism in me because I was conditioned that way. I was educated that way. And so that's a lot of shit to undo.
Yes. It really is.
And so just, my job is to just try and keep my brain open and my defenses down, and to apologize where I need to apologize, simply and genuine, authentically, and for when I do damage, and then also to work my ass off to educate my fellow white people about what we're missing.
Yeah.
And how to be in this fight.
Yeah.
So I use the narratives of my ancestors, and I try and use music, and I try and use theater whenever possible.
And you're also married to a Black man, which
yeah, I tend not to talk about Kwanzaa a lot unless I'm asked, because I don't want to weaponize my relationship. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm married to, I'm
Yeah,
married."
right. Oh, I know a Black person. Yeah, right.
And then, but I don't want to weaponize him or my son.
I like that. That's great.
I want to fight this fight. Um, they are inspiring me, and I want to protect them.
Yeah,
But I also believe that the ideological changes that we have to do are much larger
yeah.
than our personal relationships. We need to be in this because it's the right friggin' thing to do. This is a moral obligation.
Yeah,
And
human.
it's and to be, I'm so grateful to my partner, because Kwanzaa is also a musician and artist like me, but he's also a great teacher. He is a master teacher in the elementary schools,
Amazing.
and he's been in the Arctic. He's been teaching in very remote places in the last few years, and doing incredible work in those areas.
What does
And
he teach, Ali?
pardon me?
What does he teach?
He teaches elementary school, so he's in the classroom with the little ones.
He does the full like math and all the different subjects all in one.
Well, he was in the Arctic for 2 years, teaching JK.
Oh,
So you had the littlest guys. He was their first teacher.
oh, that's so great. Really?
So, yeah. So he was in Inuvik, which is
Oh yeah, Inuvic's way up there. Yeah.
way up there above the Arctic Circle,
Yeah.
and he was working with little 4-year-olds who, they're being socialized, and
Mhm.
so their first teacher is showing them how to be human, and and how to treat each other as humans, and so he's bringing his Ubuntuism, which is I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's an African philosophical base.
Yeah.
A lot of African cultures are stem from, and that is, um, I am human because you are human.
Right.
My humanity depends on your humanity, and
Yeah.
so that's a very different philosophy from your centric individualism.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so I learn a lot from him, and his family, and from visiting with him in Tanzania, where he's from.
That's actually really, I think that actually would be so powerful to the children of this generation, because I was brought up in sort of the me generation,
Right.
or just on the cusp of it going into like me, 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 me. Let's talk about me, like self-help, and
I know about me.
Yeah. Looking up for number one, me. But like that actually is a beautiful philosophy, and if the children of this generation could take on, well, I think perhaps maybe with everything that's happening, it's actually like by osmosis, it will, hopefully these kids that are coming up now, born into this craziness, will realize, if they're taught the right way, that this is a global human problem, and we need to be human to each other, and it's not about you, because everything went away, right? We were stripped of everything, just left with humans, like fending.
Yeah, and COVID has really laid stark
Yeah.
the discrepancies in the society. We cannot ignore them. They're so obvious.
Yeah.
That Black and Indigenous people and people experiencing great poverty, or people who are frontline workers, are way more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Even though COVID isn't prejudiced, it's like,
It doesn't care.
I'll get whoever I can, with these levels of access.
Yeah.
And we can see how that's damaging the poor government in the U.S. is government structures, and that whole system is finally collapsing because it's being exposed.
Yeah, yeah, and they are interconnected. Like people think that there's two separate things happening, but it's not. Like, the poverty is leading to more deaths in those less, right? Like I was looking at Texas, I think, or yeah, I think it was Texas, and I was looking at different regions because there's so many different counties, and each county, with the contact tracing is so radically different. And I saw one county that was like, I think it was Walker, Texas, that had like huge numbers. Well, it turns out my friend said that is where the prison is. And that's why the numbers are jacked in that one county. So that's the issue, right? Is that certain areas you can't just, it's
the numbers are speaking. The numbers are speaking. The statistics are speaking. And statistic gathering can be a very helpful tool in this fight.
Yeah.
Because, logic doesn't always work around racism. No. It's helpful, but white supremacy has built up pseudo logic.
Yeah.
But statistics are very helpful because to a certain kind of person that matters, and you can use that to leverage your the ideological change.
Completely.
So a lot of the work that I'm doing online now is with has been in the last 3 years has been through Conversations With, which is an organization that has now 13 different conversation groups on Facebook. The founder was Ian I.C. Bailey, who is a friend of mine, and he and his wife are very close friends of mine, who asked me to help him with the project of his book, which he was making from conversations with white people discussing race.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. Okay, that's amazing. Wow. And you actually started that way before before COVID.
Well, and these groups are very interesting because the conversations with white people, each group deals with a difficult subject.
Yeah.
And the people who are moderating and leading that group are the people who are most impacted by those conversations and those those areas or those issues.
Right.
So with that was the first group, conversations with white people about race. Mm-hmm. And so all the moderators and leaders in that group, that group went from about 1,000 when I first joined, to it's now over 14,000.
So now, when you say group, is that like virtual, like online, or?
It's a Facebook platform.
Oh, amazing! So people can go and listen to the past, like to these past. So is that what it's labeled as, Ali, on Facebook?
Yeah, conversations with white people about racism, and there's a book that's also come out of based on those conversations.
Right.
It's an excellent book, and there's nothing like it out there. It's raw.
What's that called, Ali? Is it?
I'll show it to you, and I'll post the link if you want.
Oh, great. Okay.
Conversations with White People Discussing Race by I.C. Bailey, and I was on the team that helped create this book.
It's amazing, Ali. Oh my God, so good.
And it's real conversations from these groups about all kinds of different angles on racism. So you can drop into that group, that Facebook group, or the book. Buy the book. The proceeds are going towards good causes.
Yeah. And is that? Are you talking to Americans, Canadians, or all across the board?
All over English-speaking world. and different areas, like, just questions that you always wanted to know, like, some of the chapters are like, um, you know, um, inherited racism, implicit bias, and then there's several conversations in there, and he contextualizes them, and he's an amazing brain. He had an
Yeah.
amazing. He is no longer with us. Ironically, this. He was a wounded healer, a wounded leader, and he passed in December. He was only
Oh,
50 years old,
oh no,
but
I'm sorry.
and but an incredible leader and
Sounds
founder of these groups, and very powerful speaker and passionate and a great writer,
right.
so I encourage people to join those groups if you're wanting to just even just stick around and listen,
Yeah.
and then when you feel like you can get your feet wet, you can dip in a toe, and just
Yeah.
be prepared that you might, that there's education involved, and sometimes it's heated. Sometimes the debates are quite
Yeah.
um, uh, tense,
Yeah.
intense, and so I just encourage my white people to keep with it, stay with it, move through your discomfort. A lot of the techniques of working in anti-racism is actually to trigger your white fragility.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so
See the
let's
transparency.
stir that up. Let's
Yeah.
stir that up by saying,
Yeah.
having these incendiary topics
Yeah.
that get people going, and then we can actually start to problem solve because we know where you stand.
Yeah, exactly. We sure do right away.
Yeah.
So what's your view on defunding the police? How do you feel about that?
Absolutely, totally in support of defunding, abolishing in the long run would be great,
Right.
because statistics show that the times that guns and and violence are actually needed in encounters with the police is very minimal.
Yeah.
So a lot of the problems that we call police for, the issues, community issues, could be solved in different ways. And we could have teams of mental health teams that are going in instead, who are trained to work with mental health cases, and in terms of domestic violence, same thing. Addiction, same thing. Homelessness, same thing.
Yeah.
Police with guns are being invited into spaces where that response is not needed.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I watched the Rayshard Brooks full video right from the beginning to when he got shot, and I was appalled by the way they dealt with him. First of all, it could have just been a simple, can you call someone to come and get you? That's all it had to be. Instead of, getting him worked up, you could see the guy getting nervous, more nervous. You knew he was going to do something because they were poking and prodding him, right? And like, just let him be, man. He's had some drinks. He was taking a rest in the parking lot. Let him, like, it's all how it was approached. And then shooting him in the back, shoot him in the foot. If you're going to shoot, which you shouldn't at all, but if you're going to do it, why not just wound him, but not like this. Yeah. Anyway, it's all like what you said, it needs to be, and what or Ari said too, it just needs to be fully restructured, retrained.
Yeah, I don't even think that police, the police systems, like the prison systems, need rehaul. I don't think we know how to do that. I
No,
think
I don't think
to
so
be
either.
actually dismantled.
Yeah.
Because the history of, if you look at the history, if you read about the history of those bodies, the police are the arm of white supremacy.
Right.
And we can't, if we want to truly create an equity in the world, we cannot have that amount of violence. We cannot be funding with our taxpayers' dollars that kind of that response, because that's state terrorism. It's state terrorism directed towards Black and Indigenous people, and
Yeah.
people of color, people, homeless people, towards women,
Yeah.
towards um, uh, undocumented immigrants.
Yeah.
You know, so there's this level of sadism that we cannot have anymore. We
No.
just, it's not, if we are serious about becoming truly whole as a society, we can't have that anymore.
No. I mean, I know I've talked to guys who said that they wanted to get arrested because they didn't have anywhere to live and they needed food. And they know that in prison, you'll get fed and you'll have a roof over your head. And they'd rather have that. So that's like, you know, also that people are prodding the police, you know, and poking and wanting, then that's just a whole other level of things. So, what?
It is systems of change that and really, black activists are asking, and Indigenous activists are saying to white people, do your work, do your homework,
Yeah.
Study yourselves, recognize your whiteness, recognize your unearned privileges,
Yeah.
Make the changes in your workplace, in your personal lives, in your communities, in your community life. You need to start taking action.
Yeah.
And I think you and Ari were correct in terms of the timing.
Yeah. Right.
You know,
the time is now. The time is now. That's for sure. Right. Like, I mean, that goes back to even to the Underground Railroad. If you know, it's like, here's your window. Now, gotta go. This is
it's an emergency.
Right. It is an emergency. It's a global,
it's a moral and political emergency.
Well, and what people are forgetting is that like we tend to look in North America, we tend to think it's just North America or it's just the US. This is global. This is like, right? The protests are global and it's like on so many different fronts. So yes, it has a lot to do with like 400 years of slavery, but this is, like you said, this is across the board, police and people of color, or people with machine guns, and people like whoever it is in that country who are lording over everyone. People are tired of it. They're sick of it, right? You can only take so much. It's like, so yeah. So now what? So when all of this happened, when the George Floyd like sort of movement happened, what were your conversations like in your household with Kwanzaa and your boy?
Well, you have to know Kwanzaa. He's a storyteller.
Yes.
And he was when he was in Africa growing up, he was involved with the ANC as a resistance fighter.
Oh, wow.
And as a warrior. And so he's seen a lot, and he's seen it from the African continent, which is, yes. But he's also probably one of the most well-read and versed people I know in African history from around the diaspora, and can comment and discuss, almost anything you would want to around the history and cultures of the African diaspora. Right. So we, that's all we do around here. We don't have to talk. So he has educated me and my family, and he and I both have educated our son, and as many people as we can, who need that. And also we try and provide haven for our community members who need to talk about those things and need to find refuge. So so we yeah, we have a lot of those discussions, and they are very familiar. So
Right.
a lot of the way the ideas you hear me speak are because of Kwanzaa and because of the very amazing mentors that I've had in this movement, like various sources of great thinkers and leaders of Black and Indigenous people of color, writers, musicians, artists, um, uh, people in my artist community. You and I have experienced that kind of influence that's influenced us as artists. No?
Well, yes, I mean, you and I have had some pretty unique experiences. I mean, I've never, I have, but that power of doing a cappella, you know, gospel music, traditional gospel, was, and you and I are one of the few white people in the choir, right? But that is such a powerful thing, and I wish everyone could experience that, like going to a Baptist church like I did in Seattle, and that beautiful joy of life that is celebrated within the Baptist church is just like nothing else I've ever seen in my life.
And that stems, and in the Black Baptist church, that stems from the African way.
Right.
Those are African traditions that have been syncretized with with American.
Yeah, right. Within the religion, within the church. Yeah. Well, that's well, Ali, I mean, again, all I can say is thank you for, I don't want to keep you any longer because we've been on here for a while, but we had a lot. I know we could. And I really appreciate you coming on and being a voice. I mean, your voice is very special, and I just want to show people. This is Ali's. What would you call? Would you call it a reading, or is it a theater? Would it be?
Well, this In Search of Giants is a theater project with Dr. Washington, Yvonne Washington, who I mentioned to you earlier. He's a mentor of mine and has influenced me a lot in terms of how I tell stories. Yes. And he and I worked on that project, and I've been writing some spin-offs from that project to produce as well. Right. They're very flexible. These In Search of Giants is a play. Yeah. It's kind of in the storytelling style.
Yeah, I remember I played a lovely racist within. I seem to always get cast as the racist, which is also a whole other like experience, right? Because I'm just completely the opposite. But
you know what it does? It actually, I think, as artists, that experience of playing the villain like that, it helps you to see the shadow.
It really does, yeah.
Inside of it, like, because we have to play that character convincingly, so we have to believe that character, and so we all of a sudden find these pockets in ourselves of those villains.
Yeah, which completely existed in my early years, that's for sure. Like we were, I didn't know anybody of color growing up, so it's there, right? It's on a cellular level, and which is why it's so important for our children to learn these things. So. And if you ever want to do a reading of it online, that would be amazing to do.
I'd love to do.
Yeah, especially if you have new workings of it and new, now's the time to like get all those actors together.
Yeah, the spinoff I've been writing is 3 scenes. It's like a little triptych, and it's called The Kitchen Table, and it's conversations that may have happened in my great grandmother's kitchen.
Oh, that's so
with these people that she talks about in her accounts.
Yeah.
And I don't know what actually those conversations were, but I'm speculating.
Yes.
Creating these conversations, what could have happened.
Oh, Ali, that's so good. That's so good. Well, if you ever want to do that, I'm in for sure.
Okay, thank you.
It sounds wonderful. And because that's such an important thing, not a lot of people know about the Underground Railroad and about that whole history. I mean, I have people that didn't know about Juneteenth or didn't know about any of this stuff, right? So I'm educating people today, like just yesterday, my white friends, so we have to keep talking. We've got to keep talking about all of this. Like,
yeah, and the reason that 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 history we get lost here. It has been, our white supremacist framework, and so we haven't heard those very important voices enough.
right.
And so now we've got some homework and some studying and some reading and some reprogramming to do.
Sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And passing it on. Allie, I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for taking part and being a voice in this movement that's going to continue for sure. And you and I will keep it moving, right?
You better believe it. And I also just want to again say thank you to Aurianna, because she's inspiring, and she's the reason that we're here. So.
Yeah, exactly. Have a great day, Allie. Happy post Canada Day, and happy July 4th coming up. Hopefully everyone will wear a mask and social distance.
Thank you, Duff. Thank you for doing this show. It's important.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Allie.
Okay.
Have a great day.
You too.
An amazing woman. I loved her from the minute I met Allie, and so I really appreciate her coming on. She's been, that's sort of like a through line. When I look back, there are certain people that were sort of through lines of this message of white privilege and where we stand in all of it, and being allies. And Allie is an ally. Probably the biggest one, the biggest ally I know. No, she is a force, and it's obvious through the family she was born into, right? So I really appreciate you guys tuning in today. It's 11:22. I'm going to try and get outside and get some fresh air. I just wanted to give you a little update on what's happening in Lesotho. I'm obsessed with Lesotho, which is a little teeny country in a landlocked country in South Africa. They had the lowest number of cases and 0 deaths when all of this began, and I just kept tuning into Lesotho. I also like to just look at this. That's Lesotho. That is Lesotho. This is the country, like that's God's country. That's just, whenever I feel stressed out, I look at that photo, and it just, and this is the teeny little villages up on top of the mountains, at one of the highest altitudes in the world, and in South Africa. The reason they have low cases is because it's such a high altitude. It's really hard to get to. As you can see, it's landlocked by South Africa. And so their cases increased horribly from, I think they were at 7, and now there's 35 cases in Lesotho. So I hope that the people of Lesotho will take good care and stay safe. But they have 0 deaths still, so that's a good thing, and let's keep it that way to Lesotho. So I also wanted to recommend a couple of documentaries still and books, but the one that really opened my eyes and opened many of my friends' eyes is called "I'm Not Your Negro," which is on Netflix, I believe. If not, it's on Prime Video. You can find it out there. It's also playing, I think, on TVO. It was on the other day. You can find it within your cable package, maybe somewhere. Anyway, watch it. And the 13th, which is about the 13th Amendment. A lot of Canadians don't really know a lot about that, so take a view of that. That is definitely on Netflix. And also, just educate yourselves, folks. There's so many documentaries on Jim Crow and so many things, the riots of 1927, and also on the pandemic too of 1918. It's good to revisit that and look at how things were handled back then, which was very similar to the way things are being handled now. People were social distancing, they were wearing masks, and the only difference is they didn't have hospitals. Hospitals were overrun, and people were loaded up in carts. And so let's not end up like that. I mean, some countries are overrun, and if the U.S. isn't careful, it will. I mean, at 50,000 cases a day, yikes. So, yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my guests today who were incredible. I knew it was going to be a special episode, and it was. Ari is a force, and she will continue to make a difference. You'll see that woman rise above everything. I love this flag. This is post Pride Month and Black Lives Matter. Really important thing. I just want to give you another glimpse of Ari in her element, in her power. I love this. We live in a world where trained cops can panic and act on an impulse, but untrained civilians must remain calm with a gun in their face. I really like that. Actually, that's a really important statement. So thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Get out, enjoy the sunshine, get that oxygen, keep your guts healthy, stay active, be positive. I also want to put up e-mental health again. If you need someone to talk to, or if you need resources, go to e-mental health. Also, a great resource for books on white people and white privilege, and amongst this whole thing is the AmericanRepertoryTheater.org, the white people reading list. Has some wonderful books on it. Okay, everyone. I love you. Be good to yourselves. Be good to those around you, and be kind. Okay. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the rebound. We'll be back Thursday with friends of mine, Sandra and Dr. Tim Guimond. Thursday at 1 p.m. See you then. Thanks for tuning in, guys.